founder of Empowerment Talks, ladies and gentlemen. So on behalf of Empowerment Talk, I welcome you all on board for another wonderful episode of Empowerment Talks. And as Yash explained, the purpose of our Empowerment Talks establishment is nothing but just to empower first us and then empower you all, our audience. And today is the day which I personally feel privileged to and honored to welcome a wonderful guest. And this guest, ladies and gentlemen, is not an ordinary person. And when I say she is not an ordinary person, I have a reason to say. I have a conviction and I have a belief to say why our speaker of tonight is not an ordinary person. But before I invite her and have a conversation with her and she have the conversation with you all, I want to make it sure that you all are ready to listen her conversation, but please make it sure that we reflect energy. She believes in empowering you through talks and make you energized. So before that, please put in the chat box from where you are joining and what energy you are bringing into this talk tonight. So please make it sure that we all get excited, enthusiastic, and when she have the conversation with you all, we get a complete energy in the room. So please make it sure what exactly you are expecting, what kind of energy you are expecting from today's speaker. Please put in the chat box and make it sure that we all know from where you're joining. And I request, before I call upon the guest speaker, I'll let you know that she is an NLP master trainer. And not only an ordinary NLP master trainer, but she has expertise and she teach people the techniques, and she has started a wonderful platform through which she ensures that she creates a powerful environment full of energy through various topics. You name it, you will find it, starting with a spiral effect. The inner leader. I am sure that you all guys are fired up, and I will request Yash to show the screen to you all of our speaker tonight. And she is none other than famous NLP practitioner in this region. Ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause to our speaker tonight, Carol Talbot. Yes, as you can see on the screen, also she has written a book, the title, You Divine Genius. And once you read this book, ladies and gentlemen, believe me, I have gone through this recently and I felt empowered.
I have this book as well.
And
I have this book as well.
Wow. And I request all our participants to make it sure that you go through this book, because this book will give you an inner energy. And that is the secret of success. So she is Amazon International bestseller, and she has expertise in hypnosis and timeline therapy, master firework instructor. In case you are a really brave person, I suggest you to take a course and experience the walk on the fire. That will make you a real powerful human being. And with this, I will request Carol Talbot to please switch on a video, and I request all the audience to give a big round of applause and welcome our guest speaker, Carol Talbot. Over to you, Carol.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me well. So the first thing I'd like to ask you all to do is to make sure that you're sitting up nice and straight wherever you are, or standing up, because what you may not know, but your physiology impacts how you feel. And as our hosts have said, we want you to feel in a great state right now. The second thing I'd like you to do, even if there's no one around you, is I'd like you to smile. Put on your best, brightest smile. Even if your video is not on, I want you to smile. And there's two reasons that I'm asking you to do that. We are made up of hundreds of billions of different types of cells, constantly wiring and firing in different directions. Now, have you ever noticed that when you smile at somebody, they automatically smile back? And if somebody smiles at you, the natural reaction is to smile back at them. And that's because the way your neurons wire and fire together is every time you repeat the same thought, the same behavior, when you operate from the same emotions, it strengthens the way your neurons wire and fire together. So one of the greatest things about a smile is, for most of us, it's hardwired. If somebody smiles at us, we're automatically going to smile back, and vice versa. Now, the second reason that I wanted you to smile is, did you know that when you smile, it also tells your brain that something good is about to happen? And the title of this session is You, the Genius. And today I want to help you tap into your genius within. Now, let's start with the intelligence going on inside of you, because if I take this beautiful, shiny green apple, and if I were to bite into it, the moment I bite into it, or even before, saliva is going to be released in my mouth so that I can chew this apple effectively and swallow. Digestive juices and enzymes are going to be released into my stomach and down the digestive tract. Not only that, but my body has the intelligence to know what to absorb from that apple and what to discard as waste. Pure genius. Now, when it comes to other intelligence, we all know you've got the brain inside your head, and there's many different areas of the brain that activate different things. And we know about the left brain is more logical, analytical, and then the right brain is more about intuition, imagination, visualization. And of course, sadly, with society structured the way it is, most of us have become very left brain, and we've forgotten the innate wisdom, the extra senses that are available through the right brain. So we have the brain in our head. Now, in the early 1990s, they also identified that your heart has a brain. Now, of course, it doesn't look anything like the brain in your head because it wouldn't fit. But they identified that the heart indeed has certain cells that mean that it has intelligence. And if you think back to the days of ancient Egypt, in the mummification process, they used to discard the brain as worthless, but they always made sure that the body was kept intact with the heart. They knew the wisdom, the intelligence of the heart. Not only that, but the heart has a huge electromagnetic field. We are electromagnetic beings. And the heart has a much stronger electromagnetic field than the brain. And all of you actually know this. You may not know it sort of consciously, but if you think about it, when you walk into a room, you get a vibe about the place, or you get a good feel or a bad feel about certain people. And all organisms read vibration, frequency. I'm going to talk about this later. But we've got a little bit lazy as human beings, but we are electromagnetic beings. And so that means that when you feel good, that is being emitted out into the world. And this is the importance during this challenging, exciting time that we find ourselves in globally, to manage your own state, to make sure that you act as a lighthouse, as a beacon of positivity out to people around you. And that's the beauty of wonderful sessions of these empowerment talks. We also have gut intelligence. So if you've eaten something that's a little bit dodgy, then your stomach's going to grumble and growl and tell you about it. In fact, the enteric nervous system is a huge intelligence system of its own. And I do know at the moment, and maybe you've also found this, that a lot of my clients are suffering from stomach issues brought on by stress or anxiety because of the not knowing of where we're going. It's hard to plan for the next month, let alone the next year. So a lot of people are finding that their gut intelligence is kicking in, that's saying, you need to get your stress levels down or work on that anxiety. And then there's cell intelligence. Even a single cell, and you're made up of thousands and thousands and billions of different types of cells, even a single cell has the ability to make decisions in unforeseen difficulties. Not only that, but each cell in your body holds the blueprint for who you are physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So what this means is when you come to sessions like this, or join in some of the other things that Empowerment Talks put on for you, it means as you're learning and growing, you're constantly updating your system. Your cells are literally growing, and all that information is going through every single cell in your body. You're updating your cells all the time. Now, there's much more intelligence inside you because you are a genius. But if you think about just what I've said right now, all that intelligence is going on inside of you in one.
Charging cable ledamma.
Now, just for one moment, consider the number of people in your family, or consider the number of people that you surround yourself with on a regular basis, or consider the number of people in your organization. Then you've got hundreds or thousands of brains, billions and billions of neurons whirring and firing in different directions in a potential spiral downwards in chaos. So my question for each and every one of you is, how do you harness all that potential in you and in the people around you to align it with your vision, to truly tap into that genius? And that's what this session is all about, how you can harness that potential in you and also, more importantly, impact people around you. So the 4 areas that I want to cover, and I'm quickly going to share a screen with you. Let me see if I can get this up. Just so you know our kind of like journey path today. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to discovering what lies beneath the hard drive of you. Okay, next we're going to redefine the triggers for you. And then how do you harness all the chaos that's going on in the world? How do you harness the energy of chaos and use it to your advantage? And more importantly, moving to the 4th point, how do you ignite a morphogenetic field that impacts others in a positive way? And some of you may not yet know what I mean by a morphogenetic field, and I'm going to get there. So let's first start by discovering what lies beneath the hard drive of you. So here we are, August, over halfway through 2020, and a good way into the 21st century. And hey, change has become a way of life. It's almost like business as usual is change. But just for a moment, consider, how do most people respond to change? It's kind of thanks, but no thanks. Am I right? So, and you can put this in the chat box if you've got some ideas around this. What do you think creates the biggest barrier to change? What do you think creates this resistance of, I know we need to change, but hey, what's going on? So what do you think creates this resistance? Now, I'm getting a comment already come up, the comfort zone. Okay, I would expect people to say the comfort zone. Yeah, and you hear people say, when things go back to normal, when, things go back to the way they were. And the fact is, all we are is change, and things are not going to go back to normal. We'll create a new normal. So that's a very good point. Thoughts, yes, they can also create, they can be your biggest saboteur. So they can be a block to change. And extra effort, somebody's saying here. I haven't seen, I would expect somebody to put in fear, okay? A lot of people say fear is the biggest barrier to change and creates this resistance. And I'm seeing people still put in information. Thank you for your participation. All of those are great, and they're not the biggest barrier. They're not what create that resistance. The biggest barrier to change, what really creates resistance, is your very own conscious mind. Now, the reason I say that is your conscious mind is constantly analyzing, criticizing, and judging everything that's going on around you, from what I'm saying, what I'm wearing, what other people are saying and doing. So it's critical, it's analytical, and it's judgmental. It's also reactive. So if you read the newspaper or you're looking at media right now, it could put you in a downward spiral. It could put you and your business into chaos. So think about your conscious mind like a sort of keyboard and a screen. I can type in information and it appears on the screen, or information appears on the screen and you respond and react to it, right? No, because if your keyboard and your screen are not connected to a hard drive, nothing is going to happen. And your hard drive is essentially the unconscious mind. Now, some people refer to it as the subconscious mind. It's the same, I refer to it as the unconscious mind. So just making that clear so nobody gets confused. You also have the superconscious mind. That's another level as well. I'm talking about your unconscious mind, which is essentially a recording and playback device that forms the habit mind. And it's hundreds and hundreds of times more powerful than the conscious mind. In fact, you're operating from the programs and patterns stored at the unconscious level 95% of the time. 95% of the time, you're operating from the programs and patterns you've already got stored on your hard drive at the unconscious level. Now, a couple of other things that are really important to know about the unconscious mind is it's responsible for all learning, all behavior, and all change. So how does that work? I'm only going to go through this briefly because there's a lot I want to share with you today. So in terms of learning, learning may go through conscious awareness, and it's certainly stored at the unconscious level. So for instance, if I were to ask you, what's your mobile number? You could probably go, you could get it back immediately. But my question is, where was that information before I asked you for it? That's right, it was stored at the unconscious level. So all learning is the domain of the unconscious mind. And behavior. Now, if you had just had dinner before you came on this call, are you sitting there going, consciously going, I need to digest that rice, I need to digest that drink, I need to digest that? No, your unconscious mind gets on digesting that food for you. In fact, the more important the body function is, the more likely it is to be the domain of the unconscious mind. And that's a good thing, because if for a moment you considered that you had to consciously beat your heart every second, it would probably go something along the lines of, whoops, forgot, dead. So thank goodness your unconscious mind does all that for you. And I'm sure you've all experienced times where you're driving along and you've got to your destination. It's like, how did I get there? It's a good job your unconscious mind was paying attention for you. So your unconscious mind is also responsible for all change. Now, how does that work? Well, the now that you're actually experiencing right now actually registered at the unconscious level about half a second ago. I'll say that again, it's important. The now that you're experiencing right now actually registered at the unconscious level at least half a second ago. Now, this isn't something that I just made up for fun. It actually came about through 15 years of research by a neurophysicist called Benjamin Liebe. Why is it important to you? Well, let me give you an example. Let's say you're driving along, and for those of you calling in from India, we all know what the traffic is like there. Let's say you get caught up in traffic, you get upset, you curse, you get stressed, and after you calm down, you tell yourself consciously, you know, the next time that happens, I'm just going to let it waft over me. I'm going to stay calm and relaxed and just carry on driving. That's what you tell yourself. 15 minutes later, somebody cuts you up in traffic and instantly you get angry, you curse, you shout, you scream, you get stressed. How come when consciously you told yourself you were going to operate from a different behavior, you were going to change? Well, this is because all the information hits the unconscious level and you respond and react. Remember what I said, 95% of the time, you respond and react based on the programs and patterns you've got stored at the unconscious level. Programs and patterns that may have been installed when you were a child. And if you think about it, when we're a child, the moment we're born, we're given a name, we're told our color, our race, our religion, then we're sent to school and we are taught a history that our country wants us to know. Whether it's true or not is another thing. And then we're tested on that history. And if we don't get high marks, then we're marked as low in the class and marked as a dunce. And then if you think about all sports in school, is somebody wins, somebody loses. And so it sets in motion this win-lose duality paradigm. And for many of us, sets in a lack of confidence or a lack of self-esteem, and we start operating from that pattern. So these are how some of these patterns are created. And please remember what I said, turn that 95% around. It means that we're operating from conscious awareness less than 5% of the time, which means even when you consciously think you're making a decision, you're not. That decision is based on decisions you've made in the past and based on the programs and patterns that you're operating from. So the question to ask yourself, are the programs and patterns you're operating from moving you forward in life or moving you in the wrong direction? And we are at a pivotal time in our history to start questioning some of those programs and patterns. Now, that's what I do when I work with individuals and organizations, because what you find is people are walking around and they keep tripping up on the same things. Have you found that? That you keep making the same mistakes, you keep tripping up, and it's like you're in a dark warehouse, you can't see what's tripping you up. So once you can start to recognize these programs and patterns, it's a bit like switching on the light, and you can see the wires that have been tripping you up, and you can move them aside so they can be cleared that easily. Sadly, what many people do is they switch the light off and carry on tripping up. And that's where I come in to help them recognize those programs and patterns that are tripping them up. Which leads us to the second step, which is redefining the triggers for you. Because we are creatures of patterns and habits. And it's actually our patterns in thinking and behavior that create our response to circumstances and not the circumstances themselves. So if I were to ask you, who woke up with an alarm clock this morning? And when I mean an alarm clock, I mean not many of us have clocks these days, but probably the alarm on your phone or device. How many of you woke up with an alarm device? And I'm sure most of you are saying, yep. Now think about it. What's your conditioned response? The alarm is the trigger. And for many of us, it's hit the snooze button, grab an extra 10 minutes, right? And then for others of us, it's kind of leap out of bed and greet the day. So that's, the alarm clock is the trigger. The way that you respond to it is the conditioned response. Now, if you drive a car and you're driving along and you come across a red traffic light, the red traffic light is the trigger. What's the conditioned response? Stop. When it turns to green, that's the trigger. Go. All right? If your stomach grumbles and growls, that's the trigger. The conditioned response is, oh, I think I need something to eat. In your organization, if they call a meeting, that's also a trigger. What's the conditioned response? Fantastic. Another meeting, an opportunity to share my creative ideas. Or probably, no, not another board meeting. I always think board meetings are really aptly named. And here's the thing, you are also a trigger that elicits a certain response in other people. So when people hear your name, when they hear your voice, when they see you, you're a trigger. What's the conditioned response that you elicit in other people? Is it, oh no? Or is it, oh yes? And more importantly, what conditioned response do you want to trigger in other people? Now, of course, conditioned response is nothing new. It dates back to the early 1900s, and some of you may be familiar, I'm just putting up a slide again, may be familiar with Ivan Pavlov. and his famous salivating dogs. If you're not familiar with that experiment, what he did was he took a pack of dogs, and when they were hungry, he'd show them a big fat juicy steak, they'd begin to salivate, and he'd ring a bell. Now, he didn't just do that once, he did it again and again and again. So every time they were hungry, he'd show them a big fat juicy steak, they'd salivate, he'd ring a bell. He did it so often that he could ring a bell and the dogs would salivate even if there was no meat there. How come? Because they equated the bell as the same, giving the same response, the same trigger as the meat. And that's what Ivan Pavlov wrote up in the 1930s. And it took behavioral psychologists all that time to realize, actually, as human beings, we are also subject to conditioned response. As I've just highlighted with traffic lights, with an alarm clock, when somebody calls a meeting, even when you hear somebody's name, it triggers you in some way. And sometimes people trigger you and it creates a good response, and sometimes it creates a bad response. And if you think about it, this is what intelligent marketing is all about. Intelligent marketing often hires celebrities to appear in their advertisements, in their marketing campaign. So we equate a certain degree of celebrity with a certain product. The two are equated as being the same, and we want a bit of that, okay? Now, if we are subject to conditioned response, triggers and response, the question is it possible to change the way you respond and react in certain situations? Like if somebody looks at you in a particular way, you always bite your nails. Can you change the way he looks at you? Probably not. However, you can change your conditioned response of biting your nails. If you're doing a presentation in front of a peer group and you get sweaty palms, you get nervous and your mouth goes dry and you can't think of what to say, that's a conditioned response. Can you change the audience? No. Can you change your conditioned response? Yes. In other words, can you teach an old dog new tricks? And the good news is absolutely yes. And this is where the field of neuroplasticity is opening the door to new possibilities of how the brain learns. And actually, to me, this is what makes learning, development, and education so exciting. It shows that we can make new neurological connections. Now, interestingly enough, in Australia, there was a behavioral psychologist called Alan Richardson. And what he did a study with a basketball team. So he had one basketball team and he split the basketball team, into 3 groups. The first group were allowed to physically practice popping the ball into the net. The second group were allowed no physical practice, but they were allowed to mentally visualize putting the ball into the net. That's all they were allowed to do. And the third group were allowed no visualization, no mental rehearsal, and no physical practice. Now, probably about 3 weeks later, the results were absolutely astounding, because they discovered the group who'd had no physical practice, but had just mentally rehearsed and visualized popping the ball into the net, were as good as the group who'd physically practiced. So what does this highlight for you? It highlights that it is possible to create new neurological connections. And it also shows you the power, the genius that we have inside each and every one of us. So let's do a little experiment. Now, usually this is the part where I stand up, but I'm going to keep you seated today. But what I want you to do is just to put your arms out like this, okay? Just put your arms out like this in front of you with palms down, all right? And then I'm not sure if my screen's on a mirror image or not, but it doesn't matter. So what I want you to do is I want you to turn your right palm up like this. So one hand's facing down, one hand's facing up. And now I want you to close your eyes. So if you're feeling a little bit sleepy, this is your opportunity for a power nap. Now, with your eyes closed, I want you to imagine that on the hand that's facing the ceiling, palm up, I want you to imagine There's a big heavy book, not just one book, there's 5 heavy books resting on that arm, on your right arm, the one that's turned up. And you can feel the weight of those books as your arm just goes down, down, down. Feeling heavier, heavier, and heavier. Now, tied around your left wrist is a little piece of string, and there's some helium balloons attached to it. And you can feel that your left arm is just feeling lighter, lighter, and floating up, up, up with those balloons, while your other arm is just going down, down, down with the weight of those books. Now, wherever you are right now, just open your eyes and look at your hands. Now, some of you, they may be completely different. Some of you, there may be just a little difference, but does one hand feel different from the other? That's right. Now, you can shake out your arms. Let me say and explain a little about this, because you know there never were any books on your right hand, right? And yet you felt it was heavier. For many of you, that arm went down. You know there were no helium balloons attached to your left wrist, but you felt it going up, or you felt a difference between the two arms. So all I did was I gave you suggestions for, what, about 10, 15 seconds. And when I gave you those suggestions, it created a shift in your physiology. Now, even though you knew there were no books and you knew there were no balloons, but my question to each and every one of you is, what has been the result of the suggestions, the thoughts that you've been operating from, say, the last year, the last 5 years, the last 10 years? Have the suggestions and thoughts that you're operating from, have they moved you forward towards what you want, or have they moved you in the other way? Because this begins to show you that our mind is very powerful. Mind is static. Thoughts are what create the movement. And I'm going to suggest a book that's very, very, very old, and it's free. You'll be able to get it free, whether it's through Amazon or any book channel. It's usually online as a free book. It's an old book, and it's called The Master Key. The Master Key, and it's by Charles Harnell. Okay, now in its day, in the early 1900s, it was actually a 6-month course, but you can go through the book, and it's kind of like written in parables, but it really helps you understand the power of your thoughts, your mind, the unconscious mind. And as I said, it's free. And I'm going to give you some resources at the end as well, except this is a really unique little book that many people have forgotten about, and it's just absolutely powerful. So if you forget the title, don't worry, I'll pop it in the chat box a little later on, okay? In fact, somebody's already done that. Thank you, Kanane, thank you. It's The Master Key by Charles Harnell. So this shows you how powerful mind is. Now, it's estimated. So this means you have the ability to create new neural connections. In other words, new neural pathways. Now, when you talk about pathways, one of the other things that you may have heard when I was introduced is that I'm a master firewalk instructor. And what this means is I teach people to walk across burning hot coals. And some of you are going to say, why? Why would we want to walk across burning hot coals of about 1700 degrees Fahrenheit? Good question, indeed. Well, it's estimated by the age of 35, you are 95% set in terms of how you respond, react, and emote in any situation. And I'm sure some of you have been to a training and they've told you what you're going to discover and you thought, oh, I already know that. I don't need to be here. And so this is sadly the case that most of us don't learn anything new because we're 95% set. We know how to respond and react and emote in any situation. And this is where the firewall comes in with what I call blow your mind experiences. Because when you come to the firewalk, first of all, I make people sign a pretty in-your-face waiver that tells them it is dangerous, and it is. And most people say, oh, Carol, I'm not going to sign that, or I'm not going to do this. And I always say, sign away that you may change your mind, because nobody's ever forced to walk across those coals. But what happens somewhere during the evening, people watch other people walk across, and it starts to change those neurological connections. And they start to realize that it's possible to walk across burning hot coals, something that we have been taught all our lives that is impossible. If you put your hand on the fire, you're going to get burnt. And as people dance across those flames, more importantly, it begs the question, if I can do that, what else can I do in my life? So it is possible to create new neurological connections, to create new conditioned responses, to create new programs and patterns at the unconscious level to operate your life by. And by the way, this is where, again, the unconscious mind is so, so powerful. And if you've been on personal development programs, they're great at the time, and you've probably wondered, yeah, they're great at the time, and I really thought I'd made some shifts and changes, but when I went back home, or when I went back to my normal workplace, everything went back to normal. Why? For what reason does that happen? Because the changes only happened at the conscious level. So again, this is the beauty of where NLP and a lot of the work that I do in terms of exploring the human brilliance, the human genius comes in, is working at those deeper levels of the unconscious and the superconscious. So it is possible to make shifts and changes, to create new neurological connections. And when people come to an experience like the fire walk or these blow your mind experiences, it often puts them into chaos or crisis. And chaos creates a lot of energy. And I always say it's chaos or crisis that creates our evolution. You know, we don't create evolution when we're flatlined. We have to stir the pot. And for many people, that pot gets stirred when they're really uncomfortable. This could be a dis-ease, or, you know, when they have a financial crash or financial fall. It stirs the pot. So why have I got energy up on the screen? Well, most of us are not aware that we are energy. We are energetic beings. When we see color, the color you see on the screen is an energy. When you're hearing my voice, you're actually hearing energy. So energy is the building blocks of all matter. It's sort of what creates what we perceive as our physical world. Some people see energy, as I said, color. Some people hear energy, sound. Some people feel energy. But for the most part, we've got very, very lazy. So just for a moment, I think one of the easiest exercises I do, there's a couple, I often get people to sort of, you know, bounce and shake their arms around like this, and then you stop and you feel the energy. But just for now, what I want you to do is just to rub your hands together really, really vigorously and hard as you can. Just rub them together. Good, let's get even more energy going here. So rub them together, hard, 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 hard. Yeah, move your body as well while you're doing this. Feel that heat. May need to pop up the AC a little bit more, and then just stop. Hold your hands apart. And you'll feel that sort of almost electromagnetic pull between your two hands, and they tingle. Now imagine when you get that same feeling going through your whole body. And there's a lovely exercise in Qigong, I just like to call it the bounce and shake, where you're moving your whole body for a few minutes. And then when you become still, you can feel that beautiful energy through your whole body. So you are energetic beings. Now, the energy that you are operating from right now creates your outer world, is in resonance with your outer world. Your thoughts are energy. Your emotions are energy. Your language is energy. What are you putting out into the world? Because your outer world is simply in resonance with your thoughts and your energy. And if you want to create a shift, a change in your outside world, it means that you need to shift and change your energy. Are you with me on this? Does this kind of make sense? Now, some of you are going to say, what? Carol, do you mean that I created this global chaos? Well, not exactly, but we are part of a collective consciousness. So just for a moment, consider what happens when oil is in water. Oil floats to the surface. So what we have right now is all the oil of our bad thoughts, the negative mainstream media, our fear, everything that's going on in the world is coming to the surface so that we can see it. A bit like switching on that light and seeing the wires that are tripping you up. It's coming to the surface because, yes, we operate as an individual. However, we are part of the collective consciousness. So again, people often talk about the law of attraction and they say, I'm focusing on what I want. But it's not just a focus forward. It's a two-way street. When you focus, that's the sort of forward trajectory. What you get back is the feedback, which is also subject to the collective consciousness. So this comes down to thinking about who you surround yourself with on a regular basis. Now, the only way that you can create a shift in your outer world is by changing your energy. And this is where chaos comes in, because chaos is a disruptive fuel and it feels uncomfortable. And I'm going to ask you, I'm sure all of you have had experiences in your life when you had an emotional crash, a financial fall, when you kind of lost your role or something went wrong in your life, and it's uncomfortable, it's not nice. But when you look back at that time, you see that it was actually a gift because it gave you the biggest opportunity for a leap forward, for growth. And that's really what this situation is all about. Now, how do you shift your own energy? Well, some of you may have seen or heard about cymatics. Cymatics is a sort of the field of study where it shows how frequency, vibration affects matter. And I often show a little video, I'm not today, but what they do is in cymatics, they would put sand or salt on a metal tray, and then they key in a frequency, a specific frequency into that tray. And what you'll see is the sand goes into chaos, and then suddenly it goes into beautiful geometry as it aligns with that new frequency. And then if they shift the frequency up again, the sand goes back into chaos until it aligns with that new frequency. So what's happening to us all right now? We're in that chaos before we align with the new frequency. And there's many ways that you can shift that energy. It can be through toning. It can be through meditation. It can be by doing something new. It can be through movement. There's many different ways to create that shift. But I remind you, it's chaos or crisis that creates an evolution. So what we're experiencing right now is, when we'll look back in 5 years' time, is the biggest opportunity for growth. Now, the reason that you're on this call is I'm speaking to you. I'm speaking to you as a person who wants to create that shift, to be that light in the world, who are the light workers, the star seeds who want to go out there and make a difference. Because when you shift your energy and work from a higher level, here's the good news. You start to shift other people as well. Here we come in to the morphogenetic field. Now, some of you are saying, the morphogenetic field, and she's got an image of monkeys on the screen. What's that all about? Well, let me just share a little example here. Back in the 1950s, there was an island off Japan called Kushima. And some scientists were studying the monkeys on that island, their behavior. And every day when they came to the island, they emptied a truck of sweet potatoes on the beach. Now, the monkeys liked the sweet potatoes. What they didn't like was the sand and grit that got on the sweet potatoes. That was until one monkey, a very young monkey, took the sweet potato and she washed the sand and grit off by washing it in the sea. And then she ate it. And I would imagine it tasted quite nice with the sweetness of the sweet potato and the saltiness of the sea. And she taught that technique to other members of her family, who taught it to others, who taught it to others, who taught it to others, until one day, when the scientists came, every monkey on that island was washing their sweet potato. Not only that, on a neighboring island where no monkeys from Kushima could have swum across, they started doing that as well. Now, this is the morphogenetic field that cell biologist and author Rupert Sheldrake talks about. He says when individuals of a species get together, it creates a group mind. And you've all seen examples of this in nature. So if any of you go scuba diving, you'll see a school of fish, and when one changes, they all change. And then if you look up at the sky, you'll see a flock of birds, and when one changes, poof, they all change. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful if we were able to create that in our family or with our friends or even in our organization? Well, this, to me, the morphogenetic field, is the manifestation of pure genius, and it starts with you. So do you remember I asked you right at the beginning to smile? And I said, what happens when you smile at somebody? They smile back, right? So think about, how do you light the biggest of bonfires? It starts with a single spark, and then it grows. And so you are that genius that has the opportunity to create that morphogenetic field, because when you change, others change. They say, what's he doing? What's she doing? I want some of what she's got. I want some of that beautiful energy. And it creates a ripple effect so that more and more people want to join. And I don't know how many people Empowerment Talk started with, but I'm sure when they put up those facts and figures of how many people have joined, that you'll go away and say, hey, you know, I really enjoyed that, or, you know, I felt really connected, or I learned something today. And then more people join the next time, the next time. If nobody joined each time, they wouldn't be on their 120th episode. And by the way, 1 is the number of new creation, 2 is making those connections, and 0 is spirituality. And then if you put 120 together, it's the number of 3, and the power of 3 is always something exciting. You, me, and who you can share it with. There, we've got that 3 already. So just like a simple smile, it all starts with you. So let me just recap, and I'm going to hand back over and see if you've got any questions. So as I recap, if you have questions, it would be a good idea to tap them into the chat box, and I'll see if I can answer those questions for you. So we started by discovering what lies beneath the hard drive of you. In other words, are you operating from programs and patterns that were installed from your childhood that are no longer valid? Does your system need an upgrade? Do you need a reboot? Or do you need to sort of discard the old program and start fresh again? So it can be as simple as switching on the light and seeing what's tripping you up, or you may need to redefine the triggers for you. In other words, who's pressing your button? Who do you react to? Who makes you angry? Who makes you happy? And more importantly, you're a trigger for other people. What do you trigger in other people? Oh no? Or oh yes? And more importantly, what do you want to trigger in other people? And I also explained to you that it is possible to create new neurological connections, to change that trigger. We can't train the trigger, but we can definitely rewire the response so that you respond instantly in a completely different way. And I gave you that example of the big heavy books and the balloons. And I talked about the firewalk that automatically creates those new neurological connections and begs the question, if I can do that, what else can I do in my life? So when we do those blow your mind kind of experiences, and in these chaotic times we have, chaos is a disruptive fuel. It's a lot of energy. You can harness that chaos. You can harness that energy to create a shift within yourself. And here's the thing, when you shift yourself, you ignite that morphogenetic field. You create shifts and changes for people around you. So I'm going to open up for questions. I will be saying a little bit more before we close tonight. I do want to sort of pull this all together. But right now, I'm going to put this slide down and see if there's any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. It was a great talk on awareness, consciousness, heart, mind, and energy. So, ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause to Carol for sharing with us such an insights to rediscover and redefine, harness ourselves, and ignite to get the genius from within us. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you.
I request all our audience to kindly press the button for raise your hands, and so that we can come to you and you can directly ask the question from Carol Talbot. But before I request all the participants to do so, Carol, myself, and I believe Yash and some of other participants to whom I know in the audience will be asking some questions. So I'll be starting with this question is that, this empowerment talk we started during the lockdown, and the purpose was unlocking the potential within. And as of today, we have 120 speakers, including you, joining this platform from all over the world. And most of the speakers, they spoke on various different subjects, and all are related to our life, our health, relationship, finance, and in totality, it covers the every aspects of our life. And as you must be knowing, there is a term used, the wheel of life kind of things. So most of our audience are enlightened. They know the challenges in the life, and they try to find the ways to rediscover ourselves. The question from me is that there are so many things are there in the plate. So what do you suggest? What shall an individual